Good afternoon, Joe. Thank you so much for your time today, and especially grateful that you've taken this time out to speak to me during Christmas times. And first of all, on behalf of almost 1,600 people in onshore detention, I wish to thank you for that landmark mobile phone case which you won for us.
Oh,
We are extremely grateful. We wish that there was like some kind of trophy we could make and something we could, but we all 1,600 of us and our families, we appreciate this so much.
look, Narosi, thank you very much. I'm really very pleased that that case has had such a profound effect on so many people. And, it occurred to me just the other day when I was looking at the family from Villanueva being moved to Christmas Island, that could not have been made public without us winning the case. And I know from your experience that there's things that happen to you in detention, but you can hold people accountable through the use of mobile phone technology. And I'm profoundly happy that we've been able to have a positive effect. It was an amazing case, and yeah, I don't think many people understand its impact.
Yeah, I mean, I remember being in detention in 2016, and I've seen cases, some observed myself, where circle guards would just take me to a room, switch the cameras off, and just do all kind of atrocities. And there is no independent witness or evidence to record that misfeasance. And now, as a result of your landmark case, which you won for us, I mean, the series of events like which has happened after that, the amount of corruption, the abuse of human rights, which have hit the mainstream media around the world, which is happening in these onshore detention centers, which are called state within the state.
Yeah.
I mean, but George, I mean, have to say, what motivates you? Because this, like, nobody's paying you to do this for us. What motivates you to get up in the morning, leave your family behind, and work for like hundreds of people you don't even know?
Look, I must tell you, Narosi, it's the most satisfying work I've ever done. I've been fortunate in my life. I've had a career where I worked in commercial law and property, but actually working for people and helping change their lives and change society and our attitude to particularly refugees, but also First Nations peoples, really is something that gives meaning to my life. I think it comes in many ways from my background. I mean, my family were refugees at one point in time, and they escaped Europe. And I think it's my duty to give back. I was raised that way. My grandfather was probably would be called today a people smuggler. He brought out young children from after World War II to come to Australia, orphan children who were refugees who had nowhere to go, and he brought them to Australia. So it's something that I've had in my family, my culture, and all of my life, and it gives me great pleasure, Rosie, when I see you using the phone to hold people accountable for the injustices that you're suffering. You shouldn't have to suffer any injustices, and I would work tirelessly to eliminate them, but in that one small way, you can't imagine how much satisfaction it gives me that you're able to be empowered against the brutality of this state, against this nation, through your phone.
Yes, George, I think at the very important point which you mentioned, and I think I tweeted about it some time ago. I mean, I come from Pakistan, a country called Pakistan, and I mean, there's have been some eye-opening experiences. Like back home, unfortunately, historically, we've had some brainwashing about certain ethnicities, especially Jews. And I come here and I took a stance and I've tweeted it publicly that 4 years being in arbitrary detention, I haven't seen a single person of Jewish background working for this brutal detention regime. I mean, you look at the Jewish communities. I have the highest respect for the Jewish communities because they're running pro bono legal centers like your kind self, Julian, and all these people. And I believe this is something which our communities, other communities need to take on board, the understanding of right and wrong, that having that consciousness. And may I just point out with the mobile phones, it's not just the misfeasance and abuse which we capture. We haven't seen our families for years.
Yes, that's right. It's the link to the outside world. You're absolutely right. And they wanted to take it away from you. It's another act of cruelty. Absolutely.
And I mean, this is something which I believe may come up at a later stage as well, because what Minister Dutton is trying to do is trying to bring in another legislation, trying to block trying to confiscate our mobile phones again. And I mean, we need to sort of reach out to all the parliamentarians that the profound good effect the mobile phone has had. I mean, the Australian public before the introduction of mobile phones, they used to believe what Dutton and other people used to tell them, that we're some kind of aliens who are meant to be, they need to be protected from. And look at now, you mentioned the Biloela family case. Without mobile phones, they would have been deported back to India.
Yes, absolutely. But instead, you see, there's been a real turnaround in attitudes. There's a lot of Australian people who don't see asylum seekers and refugees as bad. They look at the Biloela family and say, look, there's mum and dad and children, and it brings home the reality of the situation. So I agree with you. Without the phone, they would have been deported.
Absolutely, George. No, I mean, I have to say, George, that I've been a big fan of you since I've known for a couple of years, and a fan of National Justice Project. But I'm under the impression, and I believe that a majority of the Australian public is actually not aware of the kind of good work you're doing. I mean, they're not aware that you're doing all of that pro bono.
Yeah. Well, I agree. Pro bono, low bono, whatever you want to call it. We are working day and night for the most vulnerable in our society. We don't get any government support. We get a little bit of philanthropy. And every so often, when we win against the government, they might have to pay some costs. But no, we run on a shoestring, and yet not many people know about our successes. They've been very powerful successes. If you take the mobile phone case, as you rightly point out, at least 1,600 people benefited from that one decision. We've had other cases for the kids on Nauru where we started a line of cases that actually proved the government had a duty of care to asylum seekers that they transferred offshore. And we started with children and women who've been terribly treated by the government. And then ultimately, in the last 18 months, probably 500 people have been medically evacuated as a result of that, the cases that we brought. So thank you for your acknowledgement, Narosi, and I hope that the message does get out, that this very small outfit that focuses on strategic litigation, we try and find cases that help the maximum number of people. You know, we'd love to help more people, but we just have to focus on those cases that will do the most. And thank you for your acknowledgement.
It's it's from the bottom of the heart, George, because I know from 4 years in detention, having spoken to numerous legal organizations without having to name them, um, there was always a challenge because people in there are a lot of people who are doing their good stuff, but there are a lot of people who are not willing to help you without you being able to pay for their service.
Yeah.
And you mentioned, like, I mean, the hundreds and hundreds of people who have been able to get health service, life-saving health service because of National Justice Project.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what we love to do. We love to help the most people get the most bang for the buck, you know, the return on investment. So, yeah, and look, when we meet the families, these young children particularly, who are in a shocking state on the road, and when we see them, it's heartwarming. I mean, they were at death's door on the road, and they're starting to get their lives together. But of course, Rosie, it's just tragic because they can't recover fully, even when they're in Australia, because the government keeps them in this state of uncertainty. They don't know what tomorrow will bring. And for a young child, even for an adult, it's incredibly damaging to your soul and to your psyche. But for a child, it's incredibly damaging. And the government knows they're harming these young kids, and yet they continue with this cruel and inhumane policy.
Yeah, so that, like, the government has the liberty of having unlimited resources using taxpayer dollars to get this, sorry to say, but mercenary silks, like, to fight their cases and keep appealing and appealing and appealing, wasting court's time and overworking National Justice Project. I mean, what I want to say is the Australian public needs to recognize that National Justice Project is on the front lines against the fight for human rights against this government. And from my personal experience, I haven't seen no other organization doing more work humbly than NJP. What can people do to support NJP, George?
You're very kind. And look, there are many organizations working very hard and tirelessly. We find a little space for ourselves that's different, and we are achieving results. And I appreciate the fact that you, more than anyone, recognizes that and understand. Look, I suppose there's a couple of things. We do have on our webpage a donate page. We recently had a fundraiser which was very helpful, but we rely on donations, so that would be helpful. And also, I love your support for us at the Human Rights Commission when you put us up for awards and all sorts of things. So, look, we don't do it for the acknowledgement. If people do appreciate the work we do, perhaps a small donation is the best way of recognizing it so that we can continue our work.
No, absolutely. And I know that you don't do it for recognition. And you remember, you have to literally hold me back because I was so angry when I saw the name wasn't mentioned in the Human Rights Awards. But I mean, the point being that you have done so much work for the Aboriginal communities.
Yes.
I mean,
yeah. Well, we have an expertise on health and justice. And there's a big gap in services that are provided, not just to refugees and asylum seekers in the health area, but also First Nations people, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples around Australia. And there seems to be an intersection with mental health and also detention. So we're tending to become experts on that, and deaths in custody. We've helped a lot of families with deaths in custody on Nauru, on Manus, actually sadly in Villawood, and in prisons around the country. And there's a lot of similarities in the way people are treated inhumanely in prisons and in detention. and it sometimes ends up in death. And we want to change the system so that it's not cruel, and we take an inhumane, and we take the worst cases, particularly where there's death, and expose the horrors of the system, and we try and get coroners to make recommendations about decent treatment for people so it never happens again. So we do a lot of work, and more recently we've done some work at an inquest for an Aboriginal woman who didn't get proper health care and died as a result. And we were able to get the coroner to make findings that she was discriminated against because of her race, and that prejudice led to substandard care. Now, you probably know that yourself, that there's prejudice in our healthcare system through detention, but it's also happening outside of the detention system.
No, absolutely. I mean, what I believe is you are the voice of the marginalized people, the Aboriginal communities, the people in prison, onshore, offshore detention centers. And you recently, you very rightly mentioned about the landmark coroner inquest. The question I had for you, George, is that, I mean, the coroner make these recommendations and they make these findings, and I point out a couple of coroner investigations which you've been involved in for people who have died in immigration detention. But what happens after that? I mean, I'll give you an example, like how the coroner you were involved in said that don't give any bad news on a Friday, right? And I've personally experienced they continue to do so. So, I mean, what is the legal recourse if the coroner's investigations are actually not followed by the government agencies?
Well, sadly, Rosie, there is a problem in the system in that the coroners make many very good recommendations, like not to give bad news on a Friday. That was a recommendation from the New South Wales State Coroner in relation to 3 deaths at Villawood. Many years ago, I was involved, as you rightly say, in that case. And here you have today a situation where they're just ignoring that. Now, it's a political problem. There's no way that a coroner can force a government to, implement their recommendations. However, lawyers like myself can use that recommendation if anything does go wrong. So if something was to go wrong for a person who's giving bad news on a Friday, we can hold the government accountable because they know from the coroner that giving bad news on a Friday is a high risk activity and exposes a detainee to the risk of harm. And if something does go wrong, then they could be held responsible. But it's too late then because a life's taken or someone's harmed themselves. But sadly, our government doesn't seem to care. Let me give you another example. I was involved in the cases of Cornelia Rao and Vivian Salon over a decade ago. And there was an inquiry by Nick Palmer, who was a former AFP chief, and he made some very strong recommendations about independent oversight of medical care by HMS and others in healthcare, in detention. And after these cases were exposed, this was under the Howard government, even people like Tony Abbott were saying, oh no, we must implement these decisions, we must. About a decade later, when Tony Abbott was in government, he reversed all the independent oversight provisions, the committee that was set up to look over mental health care and detention, because it was getting in the way of their ugly and cruel and inhumane policies. So they know what they have to do, but they don't care. This is all part of an intentional harming of individuals.
No, absolutely. As in, it's an indefinite fight for National Justice Project, because the way I look at it is you continue to win these cases, you continue to be involved in coronial inquiries and uh, getting the right outcomes, but the government, on the other hand, continue to do the right thing, and you have to continue to keep fighting. But I see there's another component to that, which is the information warfare. Is that, I mean, before we won this mobile phone case, we didn't have a voice. I didn't have a voice. And the narratives, the battle of narratives, where the government tries to demonize a group of people, or to like justify their draconian policies, they would make ads, for example, like to demonize people. So the information, for example, being active on social media and letting people know about what's being done under their name and what is being right and wrong is actually very important these days.
It is. But look, Norozi, we have all around us, even now, bushfires raging around the country. It's obvious that climate change is affecting the timing and the damage that's being caused by bushfires. I'm not saying we never had bushfires, but it's obvious that something is changing, and it's driven by climate change. And yet our government denies it. They will not change. You've had the Prime Minister, even in the last few days, come back from his holiday and say, no, we're not going to change a single thing. And yet Australians let that happen. So we are blind to what is going on around us in terms of the environment and the cruelty that's going on. And I don't think that in our detention centres and offshore, and I don't think Australians are bad people. I think they're good people. But it's too hard to stomach the cruelty that's going on in our camps, in our centres. And a lot of Australians just turn a blind eye. They can't deal with it. They don't want to deal with it. So they pretend it's not happening. And the same thing with our environment. It's too hard to deal with. And so it's too big a problem, and we tend to switch off. I don't, you don't, but a lot of others do.
I mean, we talk about this bushfires. I mean, I'm in Sydney. I see like being asthmatic, all the smoke around here. And talking about the funding of the fires, we have a ghost detention center in Christmas Island, which is, by the way, empty. The main center is empty. A lot of money is being paid to Serco and all these contractors for doing pretty much nothing. Meanwhile, our firefighters have to fund themselves.
Yep.
And speaking about, I mean, this is something I always raise, that in Australia, we have mandatory voting.
Mandatory what?
In Australia, we have mandatory voting. Everybody has to vote.
Yeah.
So I say that in this day and age of social media, where you know what's going on, what's being done in your name, the climate change crisis, the human rights abuses, I mean, ignorance is not a defense in this day and age. I mean, you have to vote for a party which is going to take a stand on these issues which affect the future generations, being climate change.
Well, you and I agree, but we seem to be in a minority, right?
Yeah. I mean, hopefully we can change that. I mean, with as much time as I get on Twitter, I do some streams and, try to sort of engage with people. But I mean, this is an endless fight, which we, have to, unfortunately, in our own roles, continue having. Tell us a little bit more about NJP. I guess you only have a branch in Sydney.
Well, yes, but we do a lot of work in Western Australia and in Victoria. And we're looking at next year having a lawyer placed over in Western Australia with one of our Indigenous partners. So we will have an outpost in Western Australia because we do a lot of work there. There's a lot of problems with the police, abuse of police power there. Also Victoria, as I hear you've got Julian acting for you, which is fantastic. Julian Burnside, one of Australia's greatest barristers. We often work with him and others down in Melbourne. So We're also looking at expanding down there possibly next year, but if not, in the not too distant future, because there's a lot of work goes on in Victoria. Is your case being run down there?
My case is, yes, my immigration case is in Melbourne, registry in full federal court. And it was interesting, last Friday was represented by Julian Burnside, and it's something, you know, he's been like my hero since God knows how long. And when he's there fighting for you, it's like just another another level of happiness. So that Julian Burnside, Hugh Watkins, Karina Ford, and the case went well. The hearing was the decision has been reserved. So fingers crossed. But I mean,
But
yeah.
I was able to see, because of your ability to use your phone, that the line dropped out, but the Serco guards wouldn't restore the connection.
Yes, it was at that point of the hearing, George. See, I can discuss it with you. At that point of hearing, the three judges of the federal court were absolutely hammering the minister's barrister. He was under the pump with questions. And just coincidentally, at that point, from Serco's end, the video link gets disconnected. And as a matter of policy, the hearing comes to a halt because they won't proceed until I'm present via audio video link.
Yeah.
And I approached this Serco officer along with my female friend that would you be so kind to please, as a matter of agency, re-link the audio video link, and he just blatantly refused to do so, and refused to tell both of us to reconnect. And in all this time, three judges, my legal team, minister's legal team, everything has come to a halt. But I have to say, this gave an advantage to the minister, because at that moment in time, he was getting hammered by the three judges with the questioning. And he got a bit of a breather. But I mean, had I not had the phone to record the behavior of Serco officer, there would have been no evidence. And what they did is he racially abused me, told me to go like something, what did he say? This is not your country. My female friend Sarah assaulted her, told her it was not her country, was born here. And I came back to the compound, and Serco officers surround me when I'm on the phone with my father, and they say, there's been a trigger IMP, there's been an adverse report made against you by Serco, and your 10 points have been deducted. So what they've done, they've made a federal document, a false federal document, accusing me of doing something wrong, which goes in my immigration history, portraying me as a bad person. Mm-hmm. And also taken 10 points off my canteen spend.
I thought you managed to reverse that.
Oh, no, that was the last time. See, the last time I managed to reverse that again because of the mobile phone. Last time they did the same thing. They cut my 10 points for the behavior of another detainee as an absolute false report. And I said to Serco, residential managers, like, listen, you claim to know me very well. You should also know that I document everything very properly. So if you're going to accuse me for something wrong, please be prepared that I'm going to lodge a formal complaint. So she called me up and apologized that this should have happened and returned my 10 points, but they did it again on Friday. So in a way, these Serco people, they expect us to, I don't know, bow to them or call them your majesty, or I don't know, like, I mean, they expect us to be, they can, whatever a Serco officer writes in a Serco system becomes Bible, that this is the truth. And I made a video of the incident, which has been seen by over, I think, 2,600 Australians to the last count. And a majority of them have been calling for a sacking of the Serco officer because he doesn't reflect Australian values. So this is the advantage I have of the mobile phone, because tell you what, when I win my case in federal court, hopefully the case goes back to the AAT, the minister brings up these kind of incidents, which has been written up by Serco to use against you, that on this and this night, Mr. Anis was abusive or this and that, they would wrongly claim. I, on the other hand, will bring up audio video evidence from my phone. I was like, this is what actually happened. And there goes your credibility. So thanks to Professor George Newhouse, I have a mobile phone where I can use to collect this evidence and record the misfeasance of Serco. And as a matter of fact, it also acts as a deterrence to anything. If they have any bad ideas, they know I've got a mobile phone which they cannot touch because they'll be in contempt of court, and I'll be recording them. So I mean, it has the mobile phone. The benefits of it, I can't even count. It's infinite.
All right. Now, Narazi, you asked me a little bit about our operation here.
Yeah.
We're a very small outfit. We're based in Surrey Hills in Sydney, near Central Railway. We have about 4, 5 people in our legal team, and maybe 2 non-legal staff, and everyone else is a volunteer. And we get an amazing amount of work done. For example, we've probably got, I don't know, as I mentioned before, 500 people have come off Nauru since we started our cases, but we've got hundreds on our books. And that takes a lot of effort when you've only got 4 staff, plus you've got ongoing emergencies. So we are a bit, put to the floor. Everyone's overworked, but as I said before, the work we do is so inspiring and meaningful to us all that we put the extra effort in. But it's tough. We're a very small team, but what we do is when we get to capacity, we reach out to other sector partners. We've been working very closely with Medivac, with RACS, and with Human Rights Law Centre, with Medicine Sans Frontières, with ASRC. It's been a wonderful experience of us all working together for the common good. So whilst, we are stretched, we try and work with sector partners to do more for everyone. I don't know how we all do it. I think everyone is at capacity at the moment.
I mean, it's just me, but I reckon if I was a legal student or a lawyer or wanting to be a lawyer and wanting to make a change, having a consciousness, wanting to make a positive change, I would want to work for NJP as a volunteer. And I reckon this is what many of our people need to do. That a lot of people ask me or what we can do, or they ask other people how we can actually contribute in a way that it is effective. What I say, if you're able and willing, please make a donation to NJP. If you're able and willing, please apply to work as a volunteer for NJP, because we are overworked.
Yeah, no, listen, you're right. You asked me before, you caught me off guard when you said what can people do. I wasn't expecting that. But of course, we do need volunteers. It's not just a question of money. We have human resources, a need for human resources people, volunteer managers, because we have so many volunteers who do want to come and work with us, trainers, bookkeepers, lawyers. In fact, any sort of office position you can imagine we need. And we're very thin on the ground. So if people do have some time, and by that I mean, 1 or 2 days a week to do a job like this, we'd gladly take them on. And we do train people well. They get really useful legal experience, and then we roll up our sleeves and we actually practice the law. We don't refer cases to the big law firms. We actually do them ourselves.
So George, if I was, for example, somebody wants to volunteer what can he do? How can he apply?
Okay. On our website, there is a page where you can volunteer. Put your name down to volunteer or donate. Just pick the volunteer site. Tell us what you do and what you'd like to do and how much time you've got, and we'll get back to you.
Right. It's as easy as that, just filling up one form.
It is. Online is best. If not, our phone number's on the internet, and you can just give us a call when we're back at work. We're closed now till the 6th of January, so there won't be much happening between now and then.
But I believe you're still working. I mean, the office is closed, but you're still working.
I'm supposed to be off today, but as you can see from behind me,
Yeah.
I'm still in the office. I would like to get a little break, so please don't get you between now and the 6th, but obviously if it's an emergency, we might be able to.
Yeah, George, I mean, please stop me if I'm wrong here. I mean, I just been meaning to say something from my own hearing experience. Is that people like yourself, Julian Burnside, you people cannot be bought, because I saw the minister's barrister, probably shouldn't name him. He works for both sides. So whoever pays him the more money, who would be a refugee barrister one day, the other day he would be representing the minister, trying to separate, like in my case, me and my partner permanently. I mean, it's my humble.
I'm not going to criticize that barrister. You have to be careful about doing that. But, you know, in Australia, it's a professional, I presume, is allowed to do that. On the other hand, I work on the basis of my conscience. So I feel more motivated. I assume I'm more motivated and driven to achieve the result because I'm doing it from a place that I believe in. I truly, I'm not sure what, I'm not suggesting that anyone else is bad or not doesn't believe what they're saying, but I know that when we run a case, we do it because we believe in it, we believe in the cause, and we want to help people. And that is a great motivating force. So,
I mean, I know from my experience, George, that the people I have on my team, none of those people, even if they offered $1 million, will they work for a minister. And that's how you respect someone, because you people have consciousness that for you, the reward is not money. It's the great work you've been doing for people from Aboriginal community, incarcerated, offshore people, medical evacuation, onshore. I mean, it's non-stop.
yeah.
And I mean, the reward, I believe, I mean, in a large number of people who go study law, they feel like they want to make a difference. And I mean, I would say, take it from me, a person who's been in detention for 4 years, there's no other organization I respect more. I know there are a lot of organizations doing the good work, but the amount of love I have for NJP, please, I mean, work for NJP as a volunteer in any capacity you can. If you want to help us, please work for NJP. You're opening off an office in Melbourne, and you know it would be great to have some volunteers there.
Yeah, and Perth too. So, good point. And look, thank you so much for your time and generosity. You're always very kind to us. You don't need to be. You know, we're always happy to help you, Narosi. You're one of the most pleasant, and it's a pleasure working for you. So I wish you all the best in your case against the minister, and I hope one day you get justice and you'll return to your partner. I feel for you. It's cool and inhumane. Yeah. Who is your partner? What part of the country is?
Partner is in Melbourne, George. She has a permanent disability, and she's on without. I was a full-time carer, and without my care, her situation is deteriorated to the point that she's on a public treatment order. She can't leave Melbourne to visit me. She hasn't been able to see me in person since my detention because they kept me.
And they've separated you. You're in Sydney.
they separated me, and that's the Australian Human Rights Commission's report, which will be getting tabled in the federal parliament next year. That's what they've concluded, that arbitrary detention, by detention is arbitrary and arbitrary interference with the family. 4 years, George, I haven't been able to see my partner. And that's what I'm fighting for, to be reunited with her.
Terrible.
And but you know, I want to take this moment to say that, I mean, and I'm not, George, people will be watching this, that George Niehaus, you're one of the most humblest person, one of the most humble people I've known. You're always available to help, and I mean, there's, I wish I want to be a volunteer for you. Like, I want to work as a volunteer. I've got time on my hand, and I mean, I'll always be your fan, George.
Thank you, Narosi. Now I've got to get back and help some more people, so I might
Please.
sign off now, but it's a pleasure talking to you. I watch you and follow you on social media. Be strong, and I hope you're reunited with your partner very soon, because it's a travesty of justice. It's really appalling, and I hope the minister can see that and lets you free soon.
Thank you, George. I much appreciate that. And thank you so much for your good work. And hopefully, let's continue this fight for a better tomorrow.
All right. Thank you. See you.
Thanks, George. Thank you.